excellent. We think. Oh, good. That definitely now has gone live. Let me find me on social media. That's always helpful, and then I can hopefully see comments, because it's never guaranteed from other activities. Let's turn that noise down, and then let's see who is going to be watching. Of the two viewers, clearly I am one, because I've got you on my phone as well as on there. Let's do that, let's do that, let's do that. Oh, let's put those somewhere safely over there. Right. Let's just grab a paper plate to avoid the mess. Hi Jan, good evening. Hi Maxine, thank you very much, darling. It is my forever fear, and I think it probably always will be. So, my creative mojo to coming up with something completely different for tonight, decided it would go walkabout, which is, which is okay. So I am going to finish, or do the complete opposite side of the piece I made for the Pentart live the other day, and of course I do have a plan. So let me just pop those pieces of paper somewhere safely. Good evening Kim, thank you for joining us this evening. Hello Helen, thank you very much for joining us. Let me just pop that safely over there. Let me see if I can tag Sarah Marchant. Oh no, we won't do it on there, because that won't work for my brain, because I know full well what will happen. There we are. Because Facebook decided I could only invite 30 people, and then another 30, and that was doing my flipping head in, so that wasn't going to happen, was it? Let's move that off there. So this is the piece I did on my Pentart live last week, and I used the new cracking plaster, and I did both sides on the live. Let me just lift that up a little bit. It's always a bit fraught when I start moving cameras. Good afternoon Connie, welcome. Let me well, you definitely don't need to see me. Let me just move that a little bit up there. That will shuffle that. That will cause no chaos, but hopefully that will then mean we've got a better view. Let's just give me that. Oh, she says. That's the view you definitely don't want. That's my camera things completely falling apart, which is very unusual. There we are. Oh dear, it's going to be one of those days, ladies. I should have just cancelled the live, shouldn't I? That would have been a whole shed load easier. So I do apologise. Before we have people go feeling distinctly seasick, we'll just do it. Just look away whilst we pop that down. And then there's a huge delay in the system. So let me just, actually oh dear, oh dear. Let me just, right. Let me just move you so you can see what we're doing. Because there, oh there you are. I've eventually caught up with you, so that's always cool. That will be a better view, ladies. I apologise about that. I set my camera up ages ago and then moved it about. Good evening, Sheila. So welcome. So as I was saying, this is the piece I did on my Pentart live, and all I did post the live was add some little rub-ons to fill in some of the areas. I might yet add another butterfly over here, but that leaves me with the reverse side, which I said on the live was going to need a bit of tidying up and messing. So that can sit on multiple of those. So that's what we're going to do this evening. We are going to tackle this little lot. Oh, thank you, Mr. Facebook, on my mobile phone. And we've got some more of these cruddy pieces of hearty clay, soft clay, done deliberately. So, because those will help the pieces stand up. And for those of you that have never seen this as a concept, when you're working with pieces like this that I want to stand, he's quite a small base, as have these mushrooms, and all I've done is grab some hearty clay, and I've clearly not had my spin it seal packet very well, because some of that has dried out, and that's the clue, isn't it? When you're working with the hearty clay, you need it well wrapped up into a Ziploc bag, and I always shove in a couple of baby wipes, squash out as much of the air as possible, and that will help. Anyway, so that's so all I did to make the platforms, because I needed them to dry, was take some air dry clay, not a huge quantity, but I think it's worth going through this so that people can see what was involved. There we are. Let's just move some of that mess out of the way. There we are. And all I did was squish the piece into it, and that is now standing upright. If I try to stand that up on its own, it's going to fall down, but by doing it into the clay, so I've got a big blob at the back, but I can disguise that, and I can disguise the stuff at the sides. That's not a problem. I can neaten them down, but it's given me a nice even base to stand that up. And it's this, so I did one of those to dry, and I did the same with Mr. Frog, because again I want him to stand up, and if I try and stand him up otherwise, he won't stand. So it's just a really useful trick when you're working with things like that will help. And similarly, if you have like this shape as a bunny, it's actually not flat. If I pop him flat down here, you can see that the feet are at different levels. So if I want to stand him upright, that's not going to be possible, whereas if I anchor him into the clay, then he is, and I can squash this down, but it's just giving me a platform, and then you can disguise that platform when you want, wherever you want to. Anyway, we're not using the bunny, but it's just a really useful trick for taking pieces that would otherwise be really difficult, and then allowing you to add them. Anyway, we've got some different pieces that I haven't necessarily painted before, because I know otherwise it can get somewhat repeatedly boring. These have all been cast with the rapid resin from Pentart, the white one, but it could just as easily have been amazing casting resin. Ooh, that's about 10 times more than we need, so we'll pop some of that back in there, and we'll grab a cloth and clean the mess. It could just as easily be that. Good evening, Cassia. Hello, Helen. Welcome. So I've picked a few pieces that I haven't painted very often on recently. So these, as I say, were cast with resin, and then although you technically can paint them directly, certainly the moulds that come out of the plastic rather than the silicone moulds really don't paint as well as I like. So these have been covered with a layer of primer paste, aka gesso, so that they've got some tooth for the paint to hold on to. So I have a question so that people can answer it. What colour door would we like for our secret door? If people want to have a think about it, write some suggestions. It can be wood, it can be, well, it could be any colour you wanted. If I've got it very close to hand, then I'm up for changing it around. I don't think it has to necessarily be one colour or the other. The whole project does not matter. So there we are. And I decided that I needed to do something about my global fitness level. It's always a good idea, isn't it, you think? Not helped by the fact that my lovely gym has got its swimming pool shut, and so I had to think of an alternative method of exercise. So I'm personal training. So I've booked some personal training sessions, and they've been fine because he's a nice lad and he can easily adapt. Anyway, the gym were meant to have put in a substitute Friday morning class suitable for the knackered group of ladies who've all got a bit dodgy joints or a bit heavier than ideal, aka a lot heavier than ideal, and on a Friday morning in the gym, marked as low intensity. Well, it was anything other than low intensity. So half an hour later I decided that I wasn't carrying on with that, and now I'm a bit achy. Then I left the gym all discombobulated and not happy, and then I spent some time, and I should have known better, watching a well-known craft channel on TV going, you don't have dimension. Yes, she said it just creates dimension. And I'm thinking, no, it doesn't create dimension. Dimension is a physical reality. A piece of paper that is flat might create visual interest, but it don't produce in dimension when you park it flat. And then the bright Arab says, with another irritation, because I love the English language, and maybe I shouldn't be moaning about it, but hey ho, each to their own. The person said, and this is the plain paper. Well, it's not a plain paper. Even the plain paper in the collection, the plainest paper in the collection, has a textural imagery in it and is shade, so it's not plain. It might be the plainest one of the version, but so I'm sitting there thinking, well, it's not a plain paper if it's got variations in colours, is it? You know, and and faux texture detail on a flat surface for visual interest. It really, really irritates me that the English language then gets abused, along with the fake enthusiasm about stuff. Yeah, and then some idiot suggesting that they should ship it to America, and that it's probably cheaper shipped to America. Well, I'm thinking, well, have you not been watching the flipping news with the immediate import taxes that are going to hit any poor person shipping in from the UK? An American brand just seems to me to be completely lunatic. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not, I don't know. And maybe I just got out of bed the wrong side this morning. Certainly possible. Anyway, so mental note to self, don't watch when in bad mood, because someone is clearly going to drive you. And actually you can buy the papers that were being sold very easily in the UK, elsewhere, and not in big collections. So buy what you want, and only what you want. So that's always a better move, isn't it? So yeah, so I apologise if I'm a bit moany this morning. Oh, so let me see. Colour suggestions for the dog. Blue, green. Green to blend in with the slash. Yes, blue. Right, well, I've got several greens out. That's fair enough. I've definitely got greens out. Let me have a little think. And I can probably go hunt a bluey green. That might work, mightn't it? In the box that's on the floor next to me with my tubes of paint that I wish to use up. because we continue on mission use up, because that's good, isn't it? Yeah, it's way too easy to have too much stuff. And do I have too much of pink? Okay, it's an option. It's an option. We've got several options there. What's the dominant one? Got 3 votes for green and 2 votes for blue and 1 for pink. Wow. There we are. We might go for a bluey green, purely because with a frog that's definitely going to be green and lots of natural greenery going to be added into the piece, we might find that it's all too green if we're not very careful. But a nice bluey green might work. I'll fish in, because the dark blue I'm not too sure I do want. I've got if I had a denim blue in front of me, that might work. So might see if we can mix a denim blue. I've got denim blues. Let's see if I can find the vintage blue. That might work. I know where it is. That won't be a problem to retrieve in a minute. So there we are. So we've got a bit of painting to do today, but we're not going to be doing anything uber complicated, because we all know I don't do uber complicated. I just like playing and rearranging things. There we are. Right. Let's just, well, we haven't managed to get into all of those nooks and the crannies in that very textured piece. Not that it's going to matter. Right, we've got while I've got that grey out, that can dry, we've got our hedgehog all dressed up, and that I have got a pink out because that's going to be there. So let's just do that for the moment and leave that black. I always have black and white sitting on my desk because I just think it's really important. It's such a useful base. That's a bit too, it's not quite dark enough is the grey, but I don't want black. You see, that looks like quite a nice hedgehoggy colour. Let me just add a bit more of that into there. Thank you, Angela, for tagging all of those people for me. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. There we are. Excellent. Right, so let's see what a mess we can manage of making this, because there's lots and lots and lots of detail on this little dressed, I think it's meant to be a hedgehog, could be wrong, but I think that's what it's meant to be. Pick up some of that paler in there so we can pick up some colour variation into there. There we are. There's a little bow. Yeah, I'm not really a fantasy person, it does me head in, but hey ho, dressed up creatures is not my thing. But sometimes you just have to go with a bit of flow, don't you, and see where you're up to. So there we are. Let's just do this and then we'll let that dry. Let's not make a mess of that bow. Mind you, it won't matter if we do. That's all a bit wet, drying out. So let's just, there is some water in there, so let me just add a bit of water into there. That will help spread that for me. It's a trick that Liz really often uses. There we are. So let's just add some into there. We are going to have some paler bits around the throat of the there. So we've got an arm here. So let's just pay that down. See, just by watering it down, and then we can neaten that up. And then let's just take a little bit of this creamy grey white, and maybe not. use that one that's covered in black. Let's just pop a little bit of that into there. So this is the off-white, which from Pentart, which is definitely a pale grey. With all the best will in the world, it's definitely a pale grey. There we are. So let's just have a different colour for the throat of our, there we are, and mix those colours in. That will help. Blend it through. There we are. And then we can paint in the things, and we can use some of that for dry brushing later on. So there we are. So that can sit and dry. And whilst that is out, because I've got all of the pieces, let's just give our gnome some black feet tonight. Well, black boots. Why not? Why not? She says. Why not? There are so many little gnomes in this mould from Stamperia. It's not true. Unfortunately, whoever put them together didn't decide that they'd have 50% facing right and 50% facing left. So that's a bit of a bugbear of mine, but hey ho, we'll you can't do out about it, so you just have to learn to live with it. Good evening, Isabel, welcome. Hello, Anna. Good evening, Dominic. Let's just get that off there. Let's just get that off there for the time being. Right, so we decided we might go blue for what? Let me just grab from behind vintage blue, because I think vintage blue will work quite nicely, because it's tonally is going to work quite well, and it will work with the grey blue shades. So this is vintage blue, and it's definitely got a grey undertone, but blue it is. So there we are. So let's just, it says it's blue, you might think it's more grey, but it definitely has a blue undertone, and it's intentionally meant to be less things. And the reason I'm choosing this is that I'm not particularly wanting brights. It's not necessarily my go-to when I'm working with things. So there we are. And we'll pretend that we might add a paler blue for the trim around there. So I rather like this colour. It's not quite denim, it's not quite grey, it's definitely got a grey hue to it. I think there's quite a lot of black in the paint. There we are. But it will work quite nicely. I'm going to pick out the metal work with wax, so that makes my life easy. And we will have a bit of dry brushing. So there we are, there's a door, and there we are. So let's just pop that on there, and actually I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to paint, to keep this all in tonally correct, we're going to paint the surround for the door, for the window even. With this colour as well. Let's see how much of a mess we can make with that. And it's fine, it won't be a problem long term, I can assure you. There we are. We can tip that on its edge, and then I can just come down, brush down there. There we are, let's just come into there. There we are, reasonably. Yes, someone's going to pick it up and find fault with every little bit that's not quite right, they're either very good friends or risking their lives, aren't they? By commenting. Though if you're my daughter, who sits on the autistic spectrum, she'll say it how it is. So the bunny on the front of my piece, she says, looks like it's snorting cocaine because there's a white blob just where it's meant to be. Oh, right, thank you. Well, only you would say that. But there we are. Okay, let's just lid that before it gets too thick, and then let us have a little think about some of the other colours. So let's dangle that brush and give it a goodly wash. Hi Lisa, BC even. There we are. Let's just give that all. Right. I'm going to take that pale off grey, and I'm just going to, I think, add that onto that surround of the door. If I pick up some of the darker blue grey, it won't matter. There we are. I'll just look a little bit more distressed. Wanting it to be a little bit paler than actually. And I'm gonna, the Umbra will add some tones into that. So that's okay. From there, let's just give that a proper wash. So now what have we got? We've got my favourite. Good evening, Faith. Don't worry, Dominic, Facebook is being an absolute purveyor in the proverbial at the moment with all sorts of people. It's just designed to cause no end of havoc. Right, let us, hopefully that brush is now packed clean. Let's just paint in our little gnome's hands with a skinish colour. Because that's always good, isn't it, having skin coloured hands? I think might probably good. And right, and then the real challenge is giving him a face. There we are. That's side on, so that's always a bit of a challenge. We all come back in there and correct some of that later on when we've had a chance to let that skin colour dry. There we are. Okay, let's just take that back over there, and let's just give our ears a little bit of a pink colour, because they're clearly not going to be grey like his beard. So that can sit down there. Okay, right, let's just add some extra bits. No need to be sorry. You haven't missed the crackle, Faith, because I did it live on Pentart page on Tuesday evening. My Crafty Mojo went a bit walkabouts, and I just didn't know what I was going to do for tonight, and I didn't particularly want to cancel, but I really wasn't, didn't know what I was wanting to do. So I had a little conflab with the lovely Liz Wheeler, and she thought we could manage to do it. But it's the new Pentart crackle plaster, but you could get something very simple, very similar with the cracking paste that's been available in the UK for a long time. However, coming soon, but I'm not allowed to say yet. I've been asked not to spill the beans, so I won't. But I will say this much, is that soon it will be really easy for people to get the Pentart products in the UK. I know it's been incredibly difficult. There has been an Etsy, I think it's an Etsy site that sells lots of napkins that's had most of the stuff in, but not really a normal, what I would call a normal shop. And there is a normal shop with a series of that's importing, and they have a series of shops that have signed up to sell, but Beyond that, I'm not going to say, but watch this space because it's, I reckon, brilliantly exciting. Right, we're going to, thank you, Faith, but it's a 2-component crackle with its own primer that you paint on, and then once that's dry, you add the second, the second component, and that will then leave that to dry, and that will give you that effect. And then I've just dragged some grey paint and a little bit of metallic paint over it. Didn't necessarily want to drip cream paint over everything, but hi ho, all in all, yeah. Well, it is lovely. I will undoubtedly use it again, because it just crackles really nicely. So I've just mixed some pale green with some ivory, and you might wonder what on earth for. Well, I could make my frog's belly cream, but I think it's actually too pale to be when it's white. It just is. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that paler green into there, and then I'm going to take some thorn, which is one of my go-to greens. There we are. I've got dozens of colours out here, because why wouldn't you have? And I'm going to then make my main frog, part of the froggy, properly green, if that makes sense. There we are. And then I can blend those colours through, because we've got this, the frog is wearing a bow tie, and he has got a little jacket on, which is designed to be just ever so cute as much as anything else. So let's just paint the rest of our froggy in, because we can paint, we need to do his hands. All the detail is in the mould, you just have to spend some time and look and work out which bit is going to be painted in which colour. There we are. So we'll have a green hand on the top of there. He's got a natty, he has got a natty jacket on, so we'll do a different colour for the jacket, but we'll have a green hand or paw or foot, even whatever they might be there, and then that can sit and dry a little bit from there. Right, excellent. So we haven't got masses of colouring today, which is always good, isn't it? Now I think on the other side I mixed the coral in, didn't I? I did. So this is going to be a sister piece. I'm going to add in some colours. So that's the red. That one is lipstick red. I love crackle in all its different glories, and this one is coral. There we are. And then we'll paint in the extra details as we go, because why not? There we are. So let's just paint in our things. We're losing light. I'm losing light. Excuse me, ladies, while we go seasick. And it'll glare and then settle down, so don't worry if it goes overly bright in a minute and then settles. Yep, it will settle down. I promise you, that's it. It's just going to be easier. We're at that stage of the day where I knew I didn't need the light when I started, but I had a feeling. I did turn the main light on in the room beforehand. So here we are. We've just got lots of little bits to do. But I'm rather hoping that I'm not live for the horrendous amount of time I was live last week. Though people can comment and say whether they prefer the longer projects from scratch, or whether they prefer a shorter one. I'm more than happy for people to express what they prefer, and then try and work so that you have projects that you want. At the end of the day, we can usually, no project is ever exactly on at a set time, but I definitely can work out bigger projects and shorter projects without too great a problem. That's definitely a possibility. There we are. Good afternoon, Karen. Welcome, darling. Long time since I've seen you online. How's work? The lovely Karen has got a full-time job, so has stopped doing her craft demonstrating because something else, clearly earning a living and paying the bills, clearly had to take the priority. Oh, she says, squizzling that every which way. There we are. So we have a magic key, so I'm going to do some bits of purple. The purple is mallow for this one. And yeah, I have semi-thought about what I'm doing, honestly, when it comes to this. And then we're going to mix in some of that red to around the outside, so we'll get some shade variation. We will add some extra bits onto it, and that's also fine. Good evening. You don't mind? Okay, no problem. So I think the group description is actually for the lives to be about an hour, but you know, I just think that when you're doing mixed media, an hour doesn't give you very long to do things in. So let's just give our gnome a purple gilet. Yeah, I think it's a gilet. Well, that's what it's going to be in my head tonight, rather than anything else. There we are. Have a purple gilet. I think purple gilet is good. And then we might go for some nutty blue lederhosen. Why not? That means getting that bluey grey out, won't it? There we are. Let's just give you some bluey grey trousers, lederhosen. Why not? And then we'll give you a brown knapsack. There we are. She says, let's go for a purple hat. We'll sort out the little goggles that are on here, because this paper collection has been designed for Farrell. It's got a steampunk-esque element into it. It's quite a subtle steampunk element-esque. If you really like steampunk, it's probably not enough for you, but otherwise it's pretty cool. Okay. What colour? I think we're going to have a blue waistcoat jacket on our frog, because it doesn't matter, does it? If I was using the paper with the frog I might well coordinate it so it, you know, pick colours that went with the overall collection, but as I'm making something completely fantasy, don't actually matter. There we are. This bit will be a challenge. There we are. So let's just, and then we can I think there is a bit of, let me just tidy that up. Of that there. Good. And I'm going to give him a grey hat as well, or a bluey grey hat, because I can. There we are. Okay. We're getting there, ladies, we're getting there. Right, let me just do that, and let's just add a little bit into there. Well, that might be an interesting colour for the beard, so let's just give him a greyish beard. There we are. Good. Okay, we can come into there and sort that out. That can go on there, that can go on there. Good evening, Julie. Hello, Karen. Right, eeny, meeny, miny, I want a brown. So there we are. Anyone would think I thought about this, wouldn't you? Wow. Oh, we do try. There we are, that is a vintage brown. So let's just take the vintage brown and add that for the key. I'm going to add some gold onto it so it won't stay brown, but it will definitely look a bit better. And then we can give these all a good blast dry, and a bit of varnish, and a bit of distress, and a bit of dry brushing, and Bob's your uncle. We're still going to be live for a silly amount of time, because why wouldn't they be? Yeah, that's what happens when you're painting moulds, isn't it? It just takes your time. There we are. But there we are. Little knapsack on the back of him. There we are. There's a door there, but I'm definitely going to do that door in the brown. And then let's just add a bit of detail onto there. There's masses and masses of detail in these. Let's add just flat brushing onto there. There's another little door tucked in there. Doesn't have to be the world's best painting. There we are. Let's just add a little bit onto there, flicking that through that texture. That will work there. Right. Eeny, meeny, miny. So let's just take this and then let's just add some, carefully add little black to our lamp. There we are. So we've got a lamp. That will work. Cool. What colour do we want his bow tie? Absolutely, Kim. Technically the resin I use doesn't have to be. Gessoed first, but it's plastic. You know, at the end of the day, resins are a type of plastic. Oh. Maybe we'll not be using that colour then. I'll take the big plug of dried stuff out of there. There we are. Get rid of that. Make a mess. Ha! There we are. We can have some thinner paint out of there. But I definitely prefer to have my anything plastic either covered with a bonding primer or with a gesso, and my preferred gesso is that one, which is the primer paste from Pentart. It's quite thick, but it means that I can use it as a stencil paste as well, which just increases its versatility, which in my book is always quite helpful. Let me just take some of that and add that, so we've got a little bit less white for that. There. What colour would we like our bow tie on our Mr. Frog? Answers on a postcard, willingly received. There we are. Okay. Well, whilst you wait for doing that, I've got a list of, I've got a man. Well, I'm thinking that the frog is Mr. Frog. Well, there we are. That might be the other arm over there. So let's just paint that off a bit more grey. Might be doing the mould designers a disservice, but in my head, if you've got an apron on that's a bit frilly and a bit polka dotty, you're probably more likely to be female. So we'll have a female cut. Yeah, could be wrong. Don't wish to offend anyone in the process, because that's never my intention. Would never be my intention. Red. I can do red. I haven't got an orange out. I could get an orange, but I rather like the idea of the red. There we are. I've got a little clock on there, so there we are. Let's just have that into there. And I might just, because I've got very mucky pour on the other side, I might just see if I can resurrect some of that. Yeah. Right, we might just have to get a bit more of that vintagey grey out. You see, a little bit of that light green. I think it'll get lost as the light green. Might be wrong, but I think it might. There we are. So there we are. Excellent. So those can sit there, those can sit there, that can sit there. Right, eeny, meeny, miny, moe. We haven't managed to do that. So let's just paint that in a bit better. And then I've got these toppy bits of air dry clay, which I explained earlier are there purely to act as support, so I can stick some of these pieces freeform upright, because they won't stick any other way. They just need a bit of a base. A lot of that will get covered anyway, because we've got some faux greenery and faux stuff to put in. And there we are. But these bits are easy to disguise the fact that they're messy, but that's okay. They're intentionally, they will serve the purpose for what I want them to do while we build up the scene. And some of it won't, very little of that's actually going to be visible by the time we've finished. Cool. So we've got that, we've got that, we've got that, we've got that, we've got that. Let's just pick up some of that black. You'll quite often see me using pokey tools for adding details to eyes. There we are. It's given me some black eyes. It's just an easy way of doing it. Right, this will prove a challenge, and sometimes if a pokey tool is too big, I will use a pin. There we are, that's one eye, and the other eye is off to the edge. Right, around there. There we are. Cool. So that can go off there, that can have that. Let's just do that. Let's just go with that, the red to mimic the a nice checked bow tie would be lovely, but my drawing skills is definitely not up for painting checks into that at all, at all, at all. Right, excellent. Let's just give that lot a good blast dry, and then we can do a little bit of varnishing, a little bit of antiquing, a little bit of waxing, and then we'll be putting it together again. There we are. So I did a pure white belly on the bookends that I did, but it's too white. I think that's the softer green works, the very soft pale green works quite nicely. Seems to be reasonably dry, seems to be reasonably dry. So let's just give these all a quick whiz over with some varnish, because that is the logical next move, and then I can add some dry brushing and some antiquing. Oh dear, that brush has obviously got pale blue on it. That's okay, we'll go with it. It clearly wasn't washed out very well, but hey ho. So this is just a water-based varnish. We'll take off most of that so we don't have great big globs that take forever to dry. We can spread that around. It just makes life, protects the surface. It makes it easier to lift off. You'd probably, you might get away with lifting off without varnishing. You'll often see that I have done that in the past, but I definitely think that you get a better lift off of colour if you have it varnished before you. Do that. There we are. Get rid of most of the excess on there, cover this piece. Note to self, even if you think you've got a smallish project, perhaps it might not be so small. But that's cool, isn't it? I know you ladies really don't mind how long I spend live for at all, so that's always good. Right, excellent, that can go in there. I still haven't used that. He's worked out really well, Connie. I have to say, I am very pleased with how he has worked out. And the joy of making, of course, is that each time I do something, I can either repeat exactly what I've done in the past, fat chance that I'll remember, or I can do something that's completely different. And it makes each piece completely unique then, doesn't it? So, yeah, it doesn't really matter. So what do we think, ladies? To the news that Craft Stash is shutting. Oh, and that Andy Skinner has moved to, with Cosmic Shimmer brand, to Katie Sue. Don't all shout at once. Good evening, Stephanie. Welcome. I think it's sad that we're losing so many companies. I'm grateful that Katie Sue has picked up the Cosmic Shimmer brand from Creative Expressions and some of the stamps companies, the designers that go with it, but I suspect that we will still ultimately end up missing some companies in the process, which is always very sad. Get the slot properly dry. That's the only problem with doing these, is that it just takes a little bit of time to get that varnish dry. And if I try distressing without doing that, and I'm using going to use antique paste today rather than antiquing gel. Just takes that little bit longer. So hopefully that's there. Right, so let me stand up and hopefully not knock everything flying. Let's take this rather cream crackered brush that I keep just purposely for this activity, and I know it's been ages, but it does cover a multitude of sins, ladies. Honestly, it does. It really does. There we are. You could just as easily be using Antonis's vintage antiquing paste for that. It just adds lots more detail in. So let's just take that and sit in the depths, cover it all up. Always ends up messy. Whatever we do, it's going to happen. There we are. Let's just take that. We can cover most of that off. There we are. And the reason, I could leave these completely undistressed, but the opposite side has got the antiquing paste on, which is why I have decided that I was going to keep it all very similar in terms of the colours. There we are. But you can work that. It just softens everything. It's just giving it a slight brown undertone. There we are. The white becomes slightly yellowed by this process, which is just quite useful. There we are, just go around all of that. So for me it just makes a huge difference overall to the pieces. But if it's not your bag, and you're happy with it without it, then do your own thing and don't do it. But for me it just adds some extra detailing. I'm going to have to clean my hands. It is magic. It is just magic. It just adds so much detail. I know. You can imagine what I thought the first time I saw it, Stephanie. Who was it with? It was with Vasilis Kontos. He did it the first time, and I really thought that we were losing the plot until I wiped it back, and all I can say is I've never looked back. I don't do it for everything. I really don't. There we are. I think there is a time and a place for it, but it just makes such a difference. Right, excellent. I just want a little bit of dry brushing now on top of there. So let me just give that, excuse me while I just reach over. I'm just going to give these a blast up to set that in a little bit. I've wiped most of it off the top anyway, so that's less of a problem. I'll just give these a blast and then we can set to putting everything together. Because I've used the wax-based product this time, which you don't actually see me use that often nowadays. I tend to use the water-based ones. They smell, is problem number one. It will eventually settle down, but also it takes a while for the surface of them to dry. It always does work. It just does work. Right, let me just grab a clean cloth. In an ideal world you'd have white spirit, and I do have some on the table, but yeah, that's all very well and good, isn't it? There we are. Let's just do that. Do that. Right, clear off as much as that as I can. This is a little bit of white. That's a moderately stiff brush, so let's just pop that onto there. Possibly overly generous amount of on there, but there we are. There we are. So that works nicely. Let's just add. That's definitely more than I really needed on there, but that's okay. add just that extra layer onto there. Okay, so that can go there, that can go there, that can go there. You see, all of these layers, all of these details make such a difference. They really do. So this is just a little bit of wax. There's a little cog on that hat. So let's just add just a little bit of gold onto there. It will make a huge difference. I'm just going to add a little bit onto there, and we'll add a little bit of gold onto there on the buckle of the belt. And we've got a little clock onto there, so let's just add that into there. There we are, let's just add a tiny touch. So all of these little layers and details just make such a huge difference. Ugh. Right, excellent. So this is side one that I decorated for Pentart. So let's just turn that round, balance that precariously on there, and then we can start adding some bits and pieces. I've got, and I've got my hot glue gun on, so that's always also rather useful. So let us just add a little bit of ink. Thank you. So this is a paper piece cut from the 8-inch paper pad from Hidden Grove. It's actually going to be hung in the air. And some of these have come from the cutouts, paper cutouts from Hidden Grove, because but I've just about used all of the mushrooms from there. I didn't have enough and I needed another one. So let us just take some glue and get rid of the excess and stick him over there. Don't worry, I know he's floating. That's the intention. That's not a problem. Really isn't a problem for the moment. What I did discover is that crackle paste doesn't like to stick to it to start with. It takes a little bit. Now the paper cutouts are double-sided, so you can reverse the imagery, which is also always very helpful. There we are. Let's just hold that, let that grab. As I say, I was very much aware that the other day that it didn't grab very nicely, but it did eventually settle down. So the plan is for us to have that. See, there's a piece tucked down there. That is a piece of resin from the other side, and it's ugly because it's not painted. So when you're doing these multi-dimensional, multi-sided pieces, you have to have a think about how things are going to layer and how you're going to hide things. There we are. So that can go there, and I want my window there, and my title home can sit there. And I can't do this on a Pentart live because they'd kill me, but there are definitely some occasions when pinflair magic is what is required. Okay. because that key is going to sit there like that. The depth of that pin flare will hold it in place nicely. And now I'm going to pop Mrs. Hedgehog onto there, and Mr. Gnome is going to go there. So let me just tuck that. I'm aware I might have pushed that just off camera. Do not fret if I have. It won't be off camera for very long. So I just need to get this. So this is the, she says, getting glue squished into there. Okie dokie. So that is my piece of clay that sits into. So I'm just going to pop some glue onto there. Okay, and I'm going to do the same for Mr. Frog. Then we're going to get a hot glue gun out. Okay, and I'm just going to need to tip this a little bit more so it's not quite as flat as it is, so it's going to give me better access. So, and I think you'll still be able to see if I do that. So let me just move those. I know from past experience that a couple of pots of paint was just going to allow me to tip that just into a better place for working. So I can now take some hot glue and I'm going to pop him there, and the hot glue, and that will support that. It will support it, honestly, I promise you it will. There we are. Okay. So there is Mr. Frog. There's a bit of hot glue. And he's going to also, well, that's not where I want that. Right. Ugh, she says. See, and this is the problem with hot glue, because it makes a mess. But we'll sort that out. Let me put Mr. Frog in first, because that's where I want Mr. Frog. I want Mr. Frog there. There we are. Come on. We will get there, she says. Ugh, with glue strings every which way. Okay. That's because we've got a lump there that we don't need. So let's pop that into there. Hold that down. Get rid of that excess glue string. And hold him in place. So he's now sitting there. Right, and now I can pop ooh. Right, well we've pulled off half the paint. That's also not going to be a problem when I pulled off the hot glue. So let's just grab an extra bit of that. We can disguise all of that and all of the mess quite merrily. Oh, she says, right, go on, we'll stick you there. That's not quite where we want you. There we are. I'll stick you in there. We'll stick you there. And then we're going to grab some bits of moss, which will help hold it all in place. There we are. Come on. It's because I've got too much glue behind there. and sticky ucky mucky hands. Come on, you will stay. Right, when all else fails, we'll add another big glob of glue and hold you until you're set, and then we can cover the space and the mess. That's never going to be a problem. That glue just now needs to sit and dry. Don't you dare. Right, so let's just grab some bits of moss from the bag. So it's beginning to get empty, and then we can start to cover in some of these areas. So I know that there's a gap at the back there from that previous one, yeah, from the opposite side. And the glue gel is fine, but it's going to help. There we are. Disguise that. She's okay. So let us just add some bits of moss along there, which will help disguise that and that and that quite nicely. I'll stick that into there. I can see I've got a blob of glue that's crept through from the other side there, so let's just stick that into there. Okie dokie, 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 and just squash. The advantage of these is that the moss is malleable. And now we can stick a nice piece of moss in to there, tuck that behind, and then we can pop a little blob on the front over there. Okay, so our little creatures are in their little garden. There we are. We might have a little bit coming over there. Okay, so that will, I think, maybe do for the moss for the moment. There we are, pop that into there. Okay. There we are, there we are, there we are. Now on the other side, I visited Country Baskets, because that's what you do, isn't it? And acquired lots of bits of greenery. So let's just add in some greenery. Let's tuck that over there. No, I want it to sit up a little bit higher than that. Let's just move that a little bit so we can poke over there. That works quite nicely. That works quite nicely. I'm glad you're enjoying the process. It's just a different way of creating, but to me it just creates absolute magic. There we are. And if I turn that round, you see that's not going to be offensive in any way, shape or form. Right, so on the other side are some little primroses and some other bits. So this is just a different, I'll move that down in a minute. I'm conscious I've got all sorts of crud in front of me, but you can see the bit I'm actively working on at the moment, so that's all that really matters. Let me just move it down a little bit away from some of that mess. There we are. You can have see a better effect all round from doing that. Don't burn your fingers. So I've got some little floral-y pieces. So I'm going to add little bud. We might not add masses of them. But bit by bit, you can just build up your little floral scene. There we are. Do I want that? Yes, I'm going to shuffle that one right into there. Give it a good push. And I think we're going to pop that one there. And I know that's 4, but that's okay. I've got lots of greenery I can add. And on the other, I added some little yellow flowers. So I looked at, as I say, Country Baskets had in a whole collection of smaller flowers in lots of different shades. So we can then add, just by chopping them up, we can add just a little bit of extra colour into our pieces. I think I might have another little flower into there. Yeah, she says, burning a finger, because that's what you do if you're not very careful. And let's just add another bright yellow, so it's not just one bright yellow, and we'll stick that into there. So we've got a little flower garden, which I'm rather liking. I might want a couple more leaves scattered in, and I pop these in singularly when I did the other side, but I'm actually going to lift that up, tuck that in, so it's just poking out a little bit. And you can see by buying just a little bit of greenery. So let's take that off. I'm going to pop just the one underneath there. So yeah, those pieces, these cost about $4.95, something like that, but you get hundreds of different bits then that you can add in to your pieces. Do I want that there? No, I don't want that there. Do I want that one there? Shall I stick another one there? I think I do want another one there. Just poking out. There we are. So we've got a little garden that says home. Let me just clear the gubbins. That can go into there. And then with our little gnome, got lots of those, our hedgehog sitting there quite happily. There's there. And then let's just move that out of harm's way. I'm going to be extravagant, ladies. Do bear with. And I know this is extravagant. And no, it is extravagant. So the floral rub-ons, which sold out really quickly, have beautiful blue butterfly I have others as well. And I grabbed 2 of them. If the rub-ons have got one that's floral based, they go for it. So that one can go onto there. Let me just grab, because we're a bit up in the air. So Faith, I know you said you liked all sorts of crackle, but I think if you can get a rub-on to adhere over crackle, that is a testament to how good the rub-ons are. There we are. Just need to be patient. There we are. Let's just pop that onto there. So I've got a textured surface with lots of detail. So we've got a little rub-on there. Let's just take that ladybug from that one. Because why not? Why not have a flying ladybug? There we are. That can sit onto there. Take that other butterfly. I'm going to pop that up there. So the other side, Jan, was done on the Pentart Live on Tuesday. So how I did that, and the crackle demo is there. Okay. So we have now completed the other side of our piece. So hopefully that has been a useful activity. Let's just clear some of this gubbins away, because it's the right flipping car crash of stuff around me at the moment, so I can't actually move very safely. There we are. Let's get rid of that. So we've got our little frog quite happily there, out of the way. We've got the secret door tucked at the bottom of the forest. When we open the door, we've got another scene and a happy house with our little bunny. So same concept, 2 different feels. I do need to just add a little bit of white into those eyes. Just let me do that now. It really will make a big difference. There we are. There. So ladies, that is all for tonight. Facebook will delete this email automatically in 30 days, and there is nothing I can do about that. So I will download it and upload it to my YouTube channel. So if you're not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, then please bob over and look at it. It's at Gillian Humphrey, but I will also post the link to my YouTube channel on social media when I post the pictures of this, when it's all completely dry. So please stay safe. Remember that my plan for Sunday is to do part 2 of my art of travel collection, which will hopefully might get finished this week, but might be another week to come after that. So in the meantime, please ladies, stay safe, enjoy your weekend, and I will see you on social media soon. Bye.